Hey guys, technically there's no one here right now, but um, this is for the people watching the recording. Um, I'm excited because this is really turning into something that's influential just from some feedback we've gotten. I feel good about this space, even though it's sometimes not what I've wanted it to be yet. It's more of like future. I haven't reached it yet. But I'm excited about tonight because this was a controversial topic for a reason. At least my presentation of the topic was supposed to be controversial since it was, are you supposed to be racist? So we'll be getting into that once people arrive. And then I'm going to go over a little bit more about I'm just going to recap a little bit again until people arrive. But like, what is perspective circles and why am I doing this? Why am I excited? um, so my purpose with this was, on a personal note, was more about being in a position where George Floyd's murder was a wake-up call for me. I had not ever considered myself, definitely not racist. My best friend is African American. I value diversity, but I found myself not doing much towards social action to the point where I wasn't even paying attention to it in my life till George Floyd happened. And that really started, thankfully, I was at a point in my life where I had already done some work on myself and I had already been turning inward to kind of find some answers for my own stuff. So I was like, my philosophy is that when you're healing, your behavior or your decisions about your behavior is essentially what helps you heal, right? You have to reinforce the new ways of thinking, the new ways of feeling. So I was seeing all of these people react, and I was like, people need something that they can do towards, right? Like that was the whole craze of like, read a book and educate yourself. And I was like, well, shit, I ain't got time. I read a book since grad school, like I could read a book. I'm not taking the time to read a book. But I do. I listen to a lot of the books on racial justice and I'm educating myself. But then I also was like, people need a place to process. And I have a craft that not a lot of people have, which is being a licensed therapist and being a guide for conversations that are really uncomfortable. And so I merged the two. And in addition to like still reading and educating myself, but this space selfishly was my education, because I also see it as a dual purpose for people to learn. I am a visual learner. I'm a learner from other people's experiences. So that's essentially why this space was created, was to learn from each other, to be able to understand that we don't fully understand by tapping into hearing people's stories, hearing people's opinions, and having conversations versus debates about this topic. So this is a safe space, hopefully a therapeutic space, but it's not therapy. Some things might require a little bit more work, but because it is a therapeutic space, there are some norms that I encourage people to follow in this space. And one of them is, because this is a personal space, is to speak from your own perspective. You statements are very common in today's society. It's like, well, and even when we're talking about ourselves. So when we're talking about ourselves, use the word I. Bring it back to you. This is about your experience or my experience. So when I talk about my perspective, I really have to force myself to register, like, you know what, I was feeling this way. It's not that, and you end up feeling like this outcast if you don't talk about this topic. Be like, I end up feeling like an outcast when I don't talk about this topic. So those I statements are really important. Hold on, I've got things happening that I want to make sure I keep up with, because my multitasking is not right. Okay. that down. Okay. So, yes, this is a talking circle. It is a space, it's a supportive space. It can be something that people need to just hear. It can be some place where people need to share, they don't need to comment. And it also can be, it is a place that prompts people to be evaluative of your own experience. So when you're looking at your own perspective, try to reflect on what that concept or the topic really has and how has it shown up in your life, and tell us those stories. Keela, I'm just kind of like talking to myself, but like pre-recording what this space is like for people, just since you're the only person here.
Word.
And that is what that's what's happening right now.
Okay. No, yeah, totally makes perfectly good sense to me.
So the other points of takeaway for this space is remaining honest, open, and willing to respect everyone in here, including yourself, and the time that we have, because this is a conversation that is not going to end today. The hope would be that we find pieces of whatever we need to resolve certain concepts in our life, but or the relationship with race that we have in our life, but to take that and remain honest and open about that with whoever you have those conversations with. And yeah, that's what this space is. Let me check where, since Akiwa knows what the space is.
I do know what this lovely space is. I really do. I quite appreciate it.
Yes, I want to ask for your feedback on if you have any questions, because I don't think you do.
All right, no questions from me, mate.
Let's see. Well, we'll give it a couple more minutes, but I'm going to start the conversation.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So, tonight's topic really it stemmed from, if I'm being quite honest, it was kind of a selfish point. I was in a training about implicit biases, and well, it was an ethics training. So in my profession, continuing education is mandatory, and as yours is as well, I'm sure. And so this particular training was talking about implicit biases and whether or not, how do we remain ethical given that we all have implicit biases. So I was sitting there and I was like, I was like, it was not necessarily new information for me, but the way I was thinking, it was kind of piecing. For some reason, I happen to be thinking about perspective circles, maybe just because, I always am thinking. And I was like, okay, so implicit biases, essentially, they come from generalizations that are made and that we learn throughout our experience in life, and they're usually not something that we're always aware of. But which means they're also they're not only developed by generalizations, they're usually built off of the associations, because as humans we're naturally associative beings, so we learn based off of, and then we remember based off of those associations. So I was like, so the concept of race, something that we've been talking about, and I think if you go, anyone who listens to this recording, go back and listen other recording, is that the concept of race is a learned concept. It is a social construct. It was developed by mankind. It was not developed naturally. And so therefore, we will naturally associate and generalize the concept of race. So in my brain, if you follow me here, to me, that sets you up to be in a very black and white situation, no pun intended.
I was just going to say no pun intended. Yeah.
So my thought was like, are we supposed to be racist? And that's where I got the whole topic of today.
Makes
And like, I know you know me, but like, this is the first time you've heard that thought process.
Yeah.
But does it make sense to someone else?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but I think that there's a high possibility that it would make sense to someone else, as long as they're coming from an open heart perspective, really, to better understand, because what it really stems from is a perspective that there's no such thing, unless you are medically colorblind, as not seeing color, right? And we use and throw that phrase around a lot when we know that we're trying to basically say, hey, I'm an ally here to whatever side you're talking to, right? Whatever side is opposite to you. It's like, hey, I don't feel a way about a person because of their skin color. But in actuality, all of us do feel ways about people based off of their skin color. And so, with that being said, it's just kind of one of those things where instead of pretending like we don't see a thing, just lean into it. But again, that requires courage, at the same time, to say, hey, you're different than me. You're quite different than me, actually. As a matter of fact, upon looking at you, I might not see one thing that we have in common, right? And then a person has to say, instead of that being a bad thing, that's awesome. You're interesting. Let me get to know more about you and your perspective. But people have to be willing and just have the desire to grow. Because if you don't have that desire, it benefits you none to try and understand another person's perspective. If my goal in life was to just keep being awesome me in the state that I'm in now, exactly as I am today on this date, then cool. I wouldn't really have to bother with these conversations at all. But again, if you're coming from a place of saying, I don't understand, and maybe you were even on the other side of the fence at one point in time where you thought maybe you felt a negative way towards someone because of their skin color, and I think that pretty much, I don't know anyone who could separate themselves from that 100%. Maybe unless you're like a monk in like the mountains or something. I don't know. But, truthfully, I think that we all have stereotypes or ideologies that we subscribe to as it pertains to, someone of the opposite race. Say if we're just keeping it black and white, the black and white, then that basically is that in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I got two things. One is technically like low-key, well, it's not low-key calling you out, it's like straight up calling you out. Because the irony is that before you popped in and heard my little monologue for the pre-recorded people, is I just got done saying about how difficult it is to sometimes talk about our own perspectives, even though I know that's your perspective and you come from a very educational background. So trying to turn that like around even more and just putting yourself in that driver's seat of your own verbalization of your opinion and like using that I. So that's number one. I just want to hold you accountable to, because I just got done saying that in this recording. So I'm like, let me be consistent, right? And then the other thing is, I just forgot my other point, Keela. What's the last thing you said?
Oh shoot, I don't know. Probably something along the lines of, yeah, it's just a willfulness. If you want to understand people more, then that's what leads to that desire.
So, and yeah, I think you were talking about that courage. And so part of that, I want to take a second real quick and get technical. And just to make sure that people understand what implicit bias is, so for whoever watched this. So an implicit bias is a form of bias occurs automatically and unintentionally. So when I bridged my question about are we supposed to be racist, and it's really a talk and discussion about implicit bias, it's the unintentionality. I think I just made up a word, but that's cool. But or the lack of intention that we become racist if we don't think about race.
Right.
And
Yeah.
tie that back to what you were saying about is if, I mean, I wrote down the word denial when you were talking about it, but if we don't acknowledge the concept of race, we become naturally we become more racist because of the unintention of the general discussion around race. Like we're talking about it, people are talking about it, it's something that you see. Like you said, color blindness is not a thing in the discussion of race unless you have a medical condition of color blindness. But it is a concept because it's an action or it's a verbal, like I say, an action or behavior because of just people making the statement that they don't see color is a denial of the reality is that you do see the color, but you in turn deny the person the experience of being seen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a dilution of the experience while trying to use it as a way of mending the perceived, I don't know how I want to phrase that. It's basically trying to differentiate yourself from the stereotype, which is just usually ironically opposite of whatever stereotype it is of the person that they're trying to defend their character to. I hope that that makes sense. It's like, you're trying to say, hey, I don't see color. It's almost like saying, I'm one of the good guys, whatever avenue that is, whatever side of the black and white fence you're on. But, again, it really does dilute just there's something that you said that like sparked me wanting to say something. What was the last thing that you said?
I was saying, how implicit bias is the unintention or the lack of intention to like address the realities of what we know and what is going on, what's being talked about. So it's like if you actively choose to be colorblind, you're reinforcing an implicit bias, which kind of naturally has this generalization and black and white favor to it, causing you to kind of become racist if you actively don't speak on something that you know about.
Okay. There was like a key phrase that you said before, and I really just cannot remember it. But nonetheless, though, yeah, I think that it's just people, saying, hey, I want to be open about the fact that I want to learn something, different. But again, being open about the biases that you do have. I know that that's one point that I will make. Again, it just goes back to previous conversations that we've had in the past, just about it's a vulnerability, that's required to say, listen, this is genuinely how I feel about a thing. I see you smirking. So ladies and gentlemen, she's smirking, as if she's not on camera because like people can't see her. Because
my bad. I could have been smirking at anything. You just brought that attention to yourself.
Well, great. Well, we're just gonna.
And now you have to explain it.
Yeah, we're gonna lean into it.
Lately,
vulnerability. Yeah, that's been like a common theme that I've realized I have to work on. And the thing about it is, society teaches us that vulnerability has to be a negative thing, when in actuality, it's an opportunity for a teaching and a learning moment, because you and I have even been in examples where we didn't know maybe that this was a stereotype about the other person's race, and we've been able to talk about it and laugh about it. And I think that there's a lot of things that people feel about the other race that are just based off of ignorance. no matter what industry you're in, what it is that you do, there's some sort of bias or stereotype to every industry that everyone's in. You know, there's the funny jokes about therapists, there's the funny jokes about chiropractors, there's funny jokes about everyone. And the reason why I bring all of that out is that one way or another, there's some sort of stereotype, you know, that is associated with any person. And so with that, like, if we are willing to talk about it, to educate the next person on it, and to then kind of also liberate ourselves in a way that feels like, hey, I was able to speak up for myself. It doesn't have to just be like an industry thing, but I say that to say, like, no person is like, what's the word? I guess excused from the conversation of biases and, you know, what you were talking about, you know, just the whole topic for tonight. And so if people can just be honest about the fact that, yeah, we all got them, even if we don't mean to be. You could be Mother Teresa, Gandhi, whoever. You know, there's just certain ideologies that come with being who you are, being from where you're from, your environment, so on and so forth.
And there's also natural, like, I mean, I'm gonna kind of geek out here, and Brandon, you can chime in whenever you want to, of course. But the concept of stereotypes and implicit biases, all of these things happen in here, like the biology of how we learn and learning psychology is that, and like I said at the beginning, is that we make associations. So with our senses, with our experiences, and experiences doesn't have to be just like, you know, when you were 2 months old, you fell down and you scraped your knee. Well, actually, sorry, 2 months, 2 years, you're not really walking at 2 months. And that it's only your personal experience that you learn from. But so you are a culmination of all of these, like the way that you have to learn is in groupings. Stereotypes, the reason they exist is because they are associations between common members of a group that is usually considered, or it's a simplified version of how you make sense of something. That's how your brain works. Compartmentalization is a way for you to be able to make sense and put things one place so you can make sense of other things. So when I say, are you supposed to be racist, it's the biologically baseline condition of being a human being and operating under learning. It's a secondary choice. I see your face, Brandon. It's a secondary choice that as
it hurts. Go ahead.
When we acknowledge the lack of intention, you don't intentionally associate things.
That was it.
You remember what you were gonna say?
I do. Yes, real quick, if I could slide. I know Brandon's britches are burning. I'm gonna make it super swift. You know, it was about the intention, right? And just about living with intention. That was the point that I wanted. I'm gonna let Brandon have it. That I wanted to drive home is just that everything that you do, once you get to a certain point in life, you realize that, you know, everything's got to be done with an objective, a goal, a thing in mind. So that was just kind of where I was piggybacking off of with your point of saying, if you want to learn more about someone different, well, if you're going to learn more about someone different, you have to want to learn more about someone different. All right, Brandon, I'm letting you out, bro. Go ahead.
Like tap in.
How y'all doing? How y'all doing tonight? Can you hear me?
We're all right.
Well.
Excellent. I'm glad to see y'all in good spirits. Yeah, I have a couple things to say. While I agree with you wholeheartedly, Sarah, about how this, like, you know, happens internally and the compartmentalization that takes place, how we choose to compartmentalize, you know, is informed. I mean, for instance, like, I mean, you'll see, you know, if a black kid and a little white kid are playing together, like, they may recognize the differences in regard to their complexion, but that's not a factor for them. They will continue to play together regardless, until someone tells them, this is how you need to compartmentalize. This is how you need to be. This is how you need to think. This is what makes you different from this other person. And this is why you need to stick to your own. This is why you need to resort to that tribalism and compartmentalize, in a way that's going to protect you, because that person's dangerous. That person's going to be a problem. That person is going to take away from you. And so there is the internal programming that happens. But before that internal programming kicks in, it has to be placed there. Like, no computer runs without an operating system. And so as children, we're given this operating system, and that operating system, I want to comment, is not solely given to us at home, because there's this big misnomer, or misconception, not misnomer, but misconception that, racism begins at home. And so, if as long as we don't talk about race or racism in public or whatever, if a child is being raised properly at home, then they won't end up racist. So if a child is ended up racist for whatever reason, it's because of something that happened to them in some faraway place, some faraway land that was beyond our control. There's nothing that we are doing here currently in this situation in society that can be racist unless we talk about it, act on it, discuss it. That's the misconception. When in reality, the two work hand in hand. There are structures that exist outside of the home, and then it's the parent's responsibility to convey to the child that these structures exist outside the home through a grooming process that happens over time, from the moment where you are taken to a daycare and there's no children of color there. So automatically now, whenever you go to your multicultural grade school or your multicultural middle school, high school, whatever, or go off to college, culture shock. Never been around people of color before, never seen a black person before, or whatever. What do I have to refer to? Well, what was told me about how these people act, behave, think, believe, worship, this, that, and the third. And so then that compartmentalization, which is false, more often than not, because you weren't given that data firsthand. You were given that data via proxy. Your grandpa, your grandma, who had their own bigoted upbringing, imparted, some of this quote unquote wisdom on you. Your parents, who were sheltered as well, imparted their perception or their interpretation that they got from their parents on you. Your cousins, your uncles, your aunts. That's the only Rolodex. I'm dating myself. That's the only Rolodex, only database you can pull from when it comes to how you're going to interact with people of color. So you step out there and now you're making mistakes, right? Now you're calling people, hey, colored person, I want you to be my friend. Oh, exactly.
They're white people, don't say that.
Exactly. But that's what,
I totally said that within the last 2 years, I'll admit.
But that's what you heard from grandma. That's what you heard was acceptable, at Thanksgiving, and everybody laughed and joked about it. You know how those Negroes are. There was no black person around. There was no black person around to tell you that's kind of racist, Uncle Dave. You shouldn't say that like that. We kind of upgraded. We no longer speak in those terms. They prefer to be called this. And so, so you make those mistakes, and then out in the real world, I hear you, Akila hears you, and it's like, oh, hell no, someone didn't let you know what time it is. And now this becomes an uncomfortable situation for you, which reinforces that programming that much more. Oh no, now Akila's upset and she's angry. And I was told by my uncle how angry black women can get. Oh no, Brandon is offended. Is he going to hurt me? Is he going to shoot me the way that I was told that black people do by grandma and grandpa and Uncle Dave and all of them? And so this is how you become a victim of white supremacy as well, because now not only is how you interacted with this other culture, initially wrong, now your response internally is all jacked up. Akila ain't gonna hurt you. I'm not gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
I might tell you what time it is and be like, yo, that ain't cool. Like, here's what you need to
Right.
do. But because you've already been programmed, you may not even engage. Like, oh no, they're angry. I gotta leave. I gotta run. I better call the cops. They might try to hurt me. And so this is how it affects all of us. So are you supposed to be racist? No, naturally we're not. Naturally, we are tribalistic in regard to, it's just like, our pets, whoever feeds us as babies, that's who we want to identify with. And that's who we're going to try to appeal to, and that's who we're going to try to please. So if my parents are opening and welcoming and inviting of other cultures in my house, I'm not going to go off to college calling people Negro. I'm not going to go off and make fun of gay people, because I came from a diverse background that says my compartmentalization includes other people in the room. But if you come from programming that says your compartmentalization excludes other people in the room, then yeah, when that self-defense mechanism kicks in, that's exactly what your friends and foes are going to start looking like. All my friends are white, even though they may not have the best interests out for you. And all my enemies are black, and they may be looking in the black person across the street from you can tell you, oh, you need to watch out because, like, I've seen somebody casing your house, but you don't talk to that person because you've been told that person's scary. But you get robbed by the white person over here who you thought was cool and been spending awful lot of time around your place. So this is how white supremacy actually hurts white people, just like it hurts people from other backgrounds. So
I've never heard it put that way, Brandon. That was dope. Because it may seem like to some people that like his examples seem like extreme, but they're really not. That's literally how it goes very often, because it's something, again, you don't realize that it's there. And that's the whole topic of tonight, of something existing subconsciously within you, kind of always beneath the surface. And we look at it as coming from a place of, oh, well, we intended to do this. There are a lot of things that we're hardwired for that, they're not beyond our control altogether per se all the time. A sure person could argue that point as well. At a certain point, depending on what we're talking about, you can kind of spin the ship around and regain your control. But the whole point is, with really tying together what both of you said, the brain works on associations, right? So we're always looking for a way to relate something that we're experiencing now to something that we've experienced in the past. It's how we make sense of a thing. So that's, to your point, Sarah, that's absolutely true. And Brandon, to your point, the misfortune lies a lot of times in those ideologies, those thoughts that are beneath the surface that come from what was taught in the environment. And it literally just takes, we always say, waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? And it's like the mind is waiting for the other shoe to drop for that Black person or for that white person, mentally, again, beneath the surface. And it's really unfair because it basically sets someone up to prove someone right about something that's negative. You're fighting an invisible battle that you didn't even know that you were in. And the real unfortunate part about it is that 9 times out of 10, I'm pretty sure it could probably even be closer to maybe 9.8 times out of 10, is that once a person feels like they're taught ideology, I'll just use that word again, is true, rarely ever do they go back to try and confirm it to make sure that it's true. It's just like someone who reads something on the internet. It's like, well, came off the internet, don't care what site it's from, it must be true. Yeah, and it's like, well,
confirmation bias.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yep, see, they were right. And you've been labeled off of a scenario I guess you can just say a scenario that may have been completely situational. They may have seen you not at your best. Maybe you were hungry, maybe you were tired, or maybe they're not even interacting. This is the real effed up part about it. Maybe they're not even interacting with you. They're just a mere observer from someone who's not even in this situation to even have a piece of an understanding of what might be going on. It's just that we'll just go with the opposite. I'm this white person sitting over here. I'm at the bistro and I've got my coffee, my tea, I'm chilling, and across the street, I hear arguing and yelling and loud voices. And I'm like, well, what the flip is going on here? And then I see two Black people, you know what I'm saying, like going at it and having a disagreement about whatever it is. And it's like, yep, see, Black people are loud and ghetto. And you never were even a part of the conversation, but you were the person that was judged and that just became the face of an entire race for a person, and no one knows.
But then you gotta analyze that in that moment. Like when you make those internal comments, you make those internal statements, you gotta analyze that in that moment and juxtapose that about the same behavior you see modeled by other groups. Like, I'm sorry, but January 6th was ghetto as hell. Like
it was ghetto
in the Capitol. That was the most ghetto thing I've ever seen. Like I've been to many a rap concert, never seen people climbing the walls and walking in doo-doo on the floor like that. That don't happen in no rap concert.
That standard of like communication about the issue was like, yeah, no.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, no, talking about, you know, hanging people and no, that was extremely ghetto. But no one refers to that. They were just upset because they felt their rights were being violated. They thought the election had been stolen from them, despite the fact that you had, you know, weeks, months, you know, days of certifying and protecting and verifying that this process was going to be, you know, done in the most efficient and safe way. And as we're seeing results come through, they're being verified. But no, we don't want to admit that. We don't want to accept that. We want to pretend like their behavior is somehow above that of, you know, the crazy heathen behavior that it actually was. So you gotta analyze in that moment. I guess like you got to do that work before you even get into those situations, because just like Akila is saying, just like you're saying, Sarah, like your mind automatically goes into this compartmentalization mode whenever, you know, you're dealing or encountering new situations. Fight or flight, you got to make decisions about how you're going to act, how you're going to behave or whatever, what's a threat, what's not a threat, where are my friends, where are my foes. That's going to happen automatically. But the thing is, if you haven't prepared for that moment, then you will jump to false conclusions. Mm-hmm. And those false conclusions can lead you down paths that lead you toward, you know, more false conclusions. And now you have this distorted worldview. We don't talk to people about addressing their biases, their preconceptions in private. We talk a lot about the moment. Like the moment you see a Black man being attacked by the cops, you better take out your camera and just assume that the cops are doing something bad and the Black man needs to be watched because, you know, that's what happens these days, like in all situations. So stereotypically, you know, that Black man may have shot 3 cops. Now we don't know the condition of that. He may have been robbing a bank. He may have been, you know, under attack or whatever. We don't know. But there's a backstory that is already loaded in our brains that informs how we're going to react to that situation, right? We see a white woman in distress, you know, black man, white woman arguing or whatever. Oh no, you know, we got to be careful there because, you know, Black men are dangerous. So we got to do something about that situation when they could be a married couple having, you know, a heated debate. No one's laid hands on one another, but because we've been programmed to believe this about this type of situation, we react a certain kind of way. So, but if we analyze ourselves before that moment, you know, we've created different relationships before that moment, we're not likely to jump conclusions and say, oh no, that Black man's attacking that white woman. No, because I have, you know, interracial friends. So I'm aware that this may not be, you know, a hostile interaction. This woman may be passionate about this man. This man may be passionate about this woman. Oh, look, they're hugging now. Oh, look, they kissed. They made up. They're walking off hand in hand. It wasn't what as bad as I thought it was, because I've addressed my programming before I even came to the table. But you can't fix that under crisis in that moment. Your body's in fight or flight. Like you're trying to figure out what you need to do to intervene, to escape, to help, or whatever. Like the adrenaline's going, your brain is already moving things into compartments so you can call 911 or take out your, you know, concealed carry and shoot something. you got to deal with that before you get in that moment. We don't talk about a lot about dealing with the things before we get in the moments.
Yeah. I want to just add to add in and kind of go back to, but add on first. So naturally, we're talking about like this is all unintentional, which is why I, kind of phrased it that way. It's like, or we're supposed to be, because like naturally it happens, and then we have to create a new intervention for ourselves after we calm down. And one of the main reasons that this happens, generalizations are that broad spectrum of like it's either this or it's that, and all or nothing reactions fall right into that generalization. Emotion is powerful. It's literally energy and motion, emotion. And it's either going to be all in, or it's not until we learn separately about what feelings are, which are an evolution or sometimes a combination of your basic emotions. But that natural reaction is always going to be all or nothing. I will make that generalization with a some fact attached to it. And sorry, I just got confused as to why my cat was up here. And he was supposed to be in the bathroom.
Yeah, I didn't know he was in there, and I was trying to find something. He ran out. It was a whole debacle. Just keep him with you.
Okay, my bad. I was like,
and I got a jet. It's been great, guys. My bad to interrupt.
No, I'm good. No, good timing. We'll see you later.
Right. Toodles, guys. Input. Totally.
But what I would say, actually, it's kind of perfect timing, because the next part about that all or nothing and having that secondary, it's our responsibility as part of a human being to know how to deal with our reactions. And as children, it's up to our parents. So that kind of ties back to what you're saying, is that we're at the kind of the beck and call of our parents until we're not. But I'm going to go back and say, kind of tie this back to, I want to clarify. Mm-hmm. So you disagree with the statement or question, are we supposed to be racist? Correct?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, I don't think we're supposed to. I disagree with it in the fact that race is a construct. And so it's a construct that builds upon certain observable differences in regard to physiological differences, but it's not something that we innately come out with. So like I said, I don't believe we're supposed to be racist. I believe that we're supposed to be racist conditionally, and that is informed by those people who impart that construct on us. Now, those people who are born in, this rural situation where they're taught that, you got to fend for yourself. There's not enough, to go around. Black people are going to take from you, Mexicans are going to take from you, we're all poor out here, keep to your own. Those people are, quote unquote, supposed to be racist. And they have the most difficulty coming out of that because they are raised and steeped in that bigotry. And now when they go off to college, if they go to college, if their parents allow them to do so or whatever, or they get the opportunity, now that they're out of that incubated space, that programming is supposed to take over in their mind, and they're supposed to proceed along the lines of continuing to be racist. It's been instilled. But if they are willing to look outside themselves and push through that programming, they can break that. So when you talk about supposed, I'm not thinking in regard to all of us as the human species being supposed to be racist. I believe that there are some people who benefit from perpetuating the construct, and some people who perpetuate the construct unknowingly. For those people who benefit from perpetuating the construct, and then there are those people who don't subscribe to the construct at all, and they aren't perpetuating it.
Yeah.
So they're not supposed to be.
So what I heard was yes and then no.
Well, yes, it depends on what we mean by supposed. If we're talking about supposed in a general sense in regard to all of humanity, no, we do not come out as human beings looking to be racist to people because we don't even know what race is, right? I see you, Malvin. Are you
Sorry, no, I was, because you were getting technical with me, I was getting technical with you.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
was like, let me look up the definition, because you're like, you bring a good point to kind of like, it was an instant, I don't want to say it was marketing for me, but it was one of those thoughts that was like, oh, are we supposed to be racist? Like the question, but someone didn't have anyone critique it the way you did. So I was like, let me make sure what I'm thinking or this question, how it makes sense, and see if it needs to be changed. So I looked up the definition of supposed, and it's presumed to be true or real without conclusive evidence, intended, or required. So in terms of one of those definitions, I feel like the intention is what sticks out to me there. Is, do we intend to be racist? No. Are we presumed, is it presumed to be true or without conclusive evidence, suppose? Maybe the question comes out of that definition because of that first, I think what we both agree on is that you pop out, you're not looking for the reason to be racist and a bigot, but you're going to be exposed to things that either confirm or deny the concept as you go through life. And some of that, it runs into the second definition of what's your intention about addressing the reality that you understand your identity through a label of race.
Yeah, I mean, if that's been imparted on you, if you've been told that your team is above everything, you marry white, you're all your friends are supposed to be white, you're supposed to live next to white people, you stay around white people, and you keep everybody out. If that's what you were raised to believe, then yeah, you're supposed to be racist all day long, because that's the framework that you were instructed to see the world through. And it's that much more difficult unless you're taken out of that environment to see the world differently, because 9 times out of 10, you're surrounded by people who see the exact same way that you do. And so, yes, in that sense, you're supposed to be racist. But from a human sense, no, you're not supposed to be. And I think that's one of the things that we have to talk about when we talk about, the transfer of racism is, as we are analyzing these inner thoughts that we have about other races and what we think and what are stereotypes and whatnot, and how those stereotypes are reinforced in the moment and the people around us who echo those stereotypes, we have to specifically ask ourselves, okay, who does this stereotype serve? Like, saying all Blacks are criminals, that doesn't serve Black people, obviously. That didn't come from Black people themselves. Where are the facts? Where are the statistics that accompany this? And on top of that, what are the surrounding factors that contribute toward that? Like, we have to ask ourselves and challenge ourselves in regard to these assumptions. It's those individuals around us that push back in that regard, that refuse to challenge themselves. Like, those people have made a voluntary choice to continue to be racist. And those people are going to reinforce that negativity around you if you're talking about trying to grow and trying to change. And you need to caution yourself in regard to the input that you receive from them and how you choose to be around them, because they don't have your independent perspective in mind. They have the imposed framework that was given to them in mind as they deal with the world around them. And it may benefit them for that framework to continue. If I own a bunch of for-profit prisons and I know you are, an activist against recidivism, that's the name, that when you go back to jail, if you're an activist against recidivism, then yeah, I'm going to be trying to undermine you every step that you take, because I want to make sure my prison population stays full. I may not do it openly, but I may make some offhanded comments and references in your presence about you, about your work, to disparage your credibility so I can continue to keep my prisons full if you're successful at doing your job. And so that's where you have to do that internal work in regard to yourself to evaluate, how much of this is me, how much of this is the environment that I'm in right now, and how much of the tension I'm feeling about this is being imparted upon me by people that are close to me. Are they aware of their biases? Are they working on their shit? Because if they're not working on their shit and they don't care about working on their shit, eventually, if you are at a table with 5 Nazis and you continue going back to that table and you're hanging out with those people on a regular basis, there's probably 6 Nazis at the table. Just saying.
You had to get real expressive with that example, didn't you?
I mean, I'm just saying.
Like, man, I guess I'm a Nazi. Well, yeah, no, I mean it's well, you use the word tribalism, and partly why I wanted to go back to clarifying whether or not your answer to the proposed topic question, right, was whether it was, do you agree with it or do you not agree? Because I wanted to make sure I understood that. But then it moved into, I purposely didn't look up the definition of tribalism just at the time because I wanted to come back to it. I didn't want to be biased in how I addressed it, tribalism. But my initial thought, I mean, when you were talking about it though, is it's groupings, right? Like it's group think. You're going to naturally be in a situation that makes you the most comfortable and you have a tribe. You're with your people. We talk about it in terms of community. So the tribalism definition, the organization, culture, or beliefs of a tribe. So it's not going to be you're not going to have a lot of different beliefs in one tribe, or because then that would contradict and make you have 2 different tribes. So when you are within a group, you're naturally going to be associated because, like you said earlier, it's all confirmation bias of what you think, and it validates your worldview and makes you feel good, because who wants to live in a world where you're constantly invalidated and told that you're wrong or you're not right?
Or worse, that a world where you actually have to ask those same questions or make those same observations about people that you love and care about. Now I can potentially be ostracized from grandma, and Thanksgiving dinner. Now dad's not going to be proud of me anymore because he was proud whenever we were, making monkey jokes about Obama. And if I go home and I tell him, those jokes aren't funny anymore, then, he's going to look at me like, I'm some sort of reject. So, I gotta go home and pretend, that I'm still racist, even though, I got all these new black friends I made at school, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, I feel like the therapist in me is coming through here. It's probably just because I just got out of session too, but the all or nothing concept comes back there, right? Is that if you can't do anything about what family you were born into. Everything is now secondary, and you have to learn whether or not it works for you moving forward and make adjustments there. But if you don't want to disconnect from your family just because of this one ideology, you don't have to go back and go all in and go head to head with deconstructing their belief system. But you can do other things. But when we're naturally inclined to well, if I don't say something, then I have to say something and everything to the person and prove them wrong. That's not that's not your only option. I would you have to get a little creative sometimes. But I imagine, okay, let's say Thanksgiving's coming up, right? I mean, I grew up, well, they're mostly, the racist ones have passed on. And at the time of my life, I never addressed her because I was so scared of disappointing her. I addressed her passively to my mom, but I never said it to her.
You said your grandma?
It was my grandmother, yeah.
Okay.
And but then I also have family members who, just based off of just general exposure, may not have that gray area type perspective, and they're still on the outskirts of black and white and I don't mean in the concept of race, and just in terms of their opinion and their stance on things. So my point saying there is if I go home for Thanksgiving, it's not that I need to avoid a conversation about race Or if it comes up, I don't need to go jump right all into it, but I can either remove myself from the conversation if you're not ready to confront it. So at least you don't like technically get exposed to another idea that's not what you agree with, cause yourself a reaction, which doesn't help the conversation about this. It just confirms everything that you hate about what your family's talking about. It will keep you actually from pursuing an intervention to do something towards your belief system if you leave yourself in that environment and subject to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue that you've kind of stumbled upon is, part of the issue or part of the greater dialogue, that's been happening in this country for the past 4 years, especially as racism has like reared its ugly head, and people who were quiet about their feelings, felt more comfortable about putting those out there, and it's the issue, where you can't, I mean, where sometimes you can't get out of it. Like, you're in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, turkey's been cut, you got a plate full of food, you're eating away or whatever, and then Trump supporter, Tina over in the country, Joe Biden, fucking socialist, letting all these niggers, do whatever they want. Like, now you're hearing this, you're in the moment, and your kids might be at the table and you want to set an example for them, and you don't want them thinking, okay, well, this is just what you do. You just pretend like you didn't hear it and just keep on eating. And this is how we practice white silence. Or you engage Tina directly, and now Tina, who, and her brother-in-law, who's just as big of a supporter, and your dad, who's pretty conservative leaning or whatever, like, now you're in the situation where it's this crossfire. So what do you do? How do you deal in that moment? And that's why I do not envy white people right now at all. Like, there's a bunch of times where you like, it'd be great, to have a little bit of white privilege or the ability, not to be, worried about some of the things that I'm concerned about in regard to dealing with police and this, that, and the third. No, I mean, those have got to be awkward moments happening all around the country on a regular basis. And I'm seeing there's a lot of white people who are just like exhausted, and so what they've either done is they've disconnected from those family members altogether, or now, I'm hearing about, like, we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion, like, you got all these, like, no go zone,
normalized cancel culture.
Exactly.
That's what it comes out to be, is that you can't cancel out the concepts that people's identity are based off of. And that's that all or nothing. Is like, it exists whether you want to paint a picture in your own world around it. It will result in you ending up having to address it even more. And that's like, I don't want to get like super woo-woo, but it's law of attraction. If you resist talking about something, more than likely it's going to come and find you, because you're using energy to not talk about it. And you're not able to normalize the concept to the point where you can't see it, like, in the healthy sense, is because you're not actually as focused on it anymore. You're not exhausted by the fact that it keeps getting brought up and you keep having a reaction that you're not paying attention to, which is your energy that gets used, no one else's. You don't even have to have the conversation about race to lose energy about and be exhausted, which is why, like, part of the reason I kind of went on like a monologue before everyone got here, just to kind of recap for the pre-recording of like why I created this space, is because if you're going to be using energy not doing something and not getting any different results, eventually you're going to have to try something different, unless you're just really committed to like feeling shitty for the rest of your life. And you need some kind of normalization process and a space to, to not feel like every confirmation and probably most of the experiences that you have had around having those conversations, whether it be race, sex, politics, any controversial topic, is that you have to take, I lost my train of thought, Brandon.
I'm sure
It went that quickly.
it happens. It's happened to me a couple times the past couple days. Have you had dinner yet?
I had a snack just in case because I didn't want what happened on the other weekday night to happen, which was like I was totally like brain dead. I had just seen clients and I was just like, but I think my point was going, it's like it does feed back into that you will it's a lot of traction. Sorry. It will come back to you time and time again because you are so focused on not talking about it. So
Yeah.
therefore it will confirm every negative, not as a not necessarily a negative term, but it implies a lack thereof of something you're not getting.
And
And
that
you're
and then
just going to keep focus on it.
and that discomfort is going to build and it's going to build and it's going to build and it's going to build until the point where you're like, where you either do one of two things. You're like, I'm going to deal with this, and you may not be in a place of convenience where you can deal with it. And if you're not in a place of convenience where you can deal with it, you haven't prepared in the moment, you got too much stuff going on or whatever, then you will probably lean into reinforcing it, which is the cycle, is a whole cycle in regard to perpetuating these stereotypes, perpetuating systemic oppression. And it comes from putting off doing the work until the point where you can't do it anymore, where you don't have the capability, the time, the resources. You're too invested in the broken construct for you to do the work. So the longer you put it off, the harder it is, and the greater the chance of you passing it on to your children, because now that's the only way you can see the world. You've lied to yourself for so long. So what?
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, you lied to yourself for so long. You've galvanized your position in the community. You've surrounded yourself with a whole network of bigots and racists who are just as comfortable being bigoted and racist, as you've been programmed to be. And so now, if you change your life, you've lost family. Yeah, you've lost family. You've lost friends. You've lost career opportunities. You've lost, your children, opportunities for them. Like, there's a whole network that evaporates when you step away from that system the longer you're in it. And that's part of how white supremacy, that's all part of how any system of supremacy, not just in this country. In this country, we're talking about white supremacy primarily, but whenever you're talking about like other countries, it's the same structure. Buy into this and you will be rewarded in the sweet by and by later on down the line for your loyalty.
It's all or nothing.
Exactly.
And that's like I said to my client earlier today, and I literally, and I feel like it's gonna sound, I don't even want to say the N word, not the race N word, but the hot N word right now, which is narcissist, because that definition has been taken so out of context from a clinical term. But it's gonna sound a little pompous of me to say that I look to be wrong for this, is that I look at most situations, and because I'm like looking for my own confirmation bias, I'm like, am I just seeing everything operate as all or nothing because that's what I believe? But I check it with other people. I give them like, hey, is it just me, or is like, what are you seeing here? And it always comes back down to most of the thing. All or nothing's not always bad, but it is a short-term solution.
But it's about, but it's an astute observation and a factual observation. And let me tell you why. Because like I said, these constructs are about preservation of a power structure. And so preservation of that power structure ensures survival for a certain way of life for a certain section of individuals. Some people actually have access to the benefits and privileges of that designation. Other people are being promised that access. So yeah, if you are rich, white, affluent male, it behooves you to buy into this construct so you can preserve the power structure that exists for you. If you're poor, white, it behooves you to buy into this power structure because maybe some of these people who are rich and white, they might marry you in, they might give you a job opportunity, they might look out for you because they know that they can trust you on site based off of this broken construct, right?
Mhm.
So you have these multiple reinforcing um, 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 I guess like fundamental aspects that need to be perpetuated and need to be bought into, that help you as an individual determine, that I want to continue to perpetuate this because, it's going to make me rich someday. It's going to get me a house. It's going to get me, in this zip code in this school district. And all of this is systemic because we have taxes, and the taxes contribute to our local taxes, contribute to how good our school districts are. So that's how we perpetuate white supremacy in that regard. So if all of our local taxes in this 6-figure household school district are going toward making the school district better, we're going to have a better school than this poor district that is, an area code over, right? So, but how did that come to be? Well, we have a history of redlining in this country. We have a history of making sure that people of color don't have access to these affluent districts. And so now you have everybody scrambling to get into these districts. Property values are through the roof in these districts. Power is cemented in the form of capital in these districts. And so that power gives people advantages in that district, and it behooves you to preserve that power structure in that district. So you need to buy into it and not make it more equitable for other individuals. Go ahead.
It's like raising my hand in my own group. No, I'm only doing this. I'm going to do a little controversial. It's going to suck for you, but only because I called Keel out for it earlier. And I literally started this recording, like I said, going over, why I created this space. And one of the main points is put yourself back in that driver's seat. Your power is in your own perspective. So I agree with, and I think what you're saying needs to be heard from the perspective of what you're teaching people. But I want to hear something on how you've experienced that.
How I've experienced what I just relayed to you. We've talked about this before in regard to the school district that I grew up in. I'm not from here in North Carolina. I grew up in, Topeka, Kansas. And so there were, and the school district that I was in, is currently just found out that, they were within the past year, found out that they were founded by not just a Klan member, but a Klan leader. And so that culture permeated the district, and a lot of things were normalized. And basically last night, literally, today's Tuesday, on Monday, the school district released a report that was conducted by, a fact-finding group in regard to the name change. And so they got letters, they got articles, they got petitions. And so all of this data, was turned into this report. And in the report, they chose to exclude the racial demographic information of the participants and just went off of commentary and feelings and sentiments that were reported to them in regard to coming up like with real fancy charts that basically confirmed that the school district overwhelmingly does not want to change the name, right? So you asked a bunch of people who were comfortable with white supremacy because they were founded in white supremacy. Like, this guy was an open Klan member. No one, he was in newspapers. So everybody knew he was a member of the KKK. And you can't say that, back at that time, it was just a thing. Nobody knew racism was bad. As a matter of fact, the governor of Kansas was busy trying to kick the KKK out of Kansas because he was like, don't bring that racist Southern shit up here. Kansas is not going to be a house for racism. So they can't even hide behind that and say, it was just the times. That district was founded as a stronghold for white supremacy. He was actually using the Klan to gain political power. This is all documented and was uncovered in this fact-finding mission, right? So how does that connect to Brandon? Brandon grows up in that district, and yeah, we heard rumors about it, We heard rumors that it might be true, but no one ever confirmed it. No one ever found out. You got people breaking into the school, spray painting KKK on lockers. Kids came out to my house, put nigger on my driveway when I was in middle school. And so it's like you have these racist stunts that are happening on a regular basis, as well as the microaggressions that happen at school. Monkey noises are being made to me in the hallway. I'm being called Curious George, people making fun of my nose, people making fun of my lips, common occurrence. And then whenever this is relayed, and still going on today with students there, and it's relayed to the group, relayed to administration, hey, yo, there's a culture of racism at this school. The answers that these students receive, the answers that the detractors of the name receive, oh, everybody gets bullied. It's just bullying. You just need to learn they just need to learn how to deal with it. The world isn't going to, be all candy canes and roses. This is just how it is. People just need to deal with it. Not the fact that that's a culture that was brought up there. And that's what I was expected to live through, because they never analyzed it.
Come from.
So what?
I said, and where does bullying come from?
Exactly.
It's for those who can't read our minds and or maybe skipped over the conversation, it comes from your parents.
And not only that,
family.
and like I said, the school district itself was named after a bully. Like, there's no bigger bully of minorities than the Klan. Like, I don't know of a bigger domestic threat to minorities in this country than an organized white supremacist organization that was vying for political power, and it was actually dubbed to be a terrorist organization by the literal White House. And so you are celebrating a terrorist, you are edifying a bully, you are making sure someone who literally is documented as oppressing people of color in your community, you're making sure they have a place of power and privilege. And one thing that was not uncovered during this whole rename situation was the names of any of the other family members, any of the other individuals who put this man in his position. And there's a bunch of people in that district who celebrate the fact that they had been in that district for generations. So
you left.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you left like one point out in that rendition, is that it also excludes the experience of a child who has gone to that school and experienced being bullied, and then told that their experience doesn't exist because it's not racist.
Or at the very least,
part of life.
Or at the very least, pales in comparison to the opinions of the majority. Yeah, you were bullied, but it really doesn't matter because there's not a lot of you here anyway. And if you don't like it here, you can go someplace else. So, as long as you all choose to live in this district, that's just something you're just going to have to deal with. But we're not racist, though. And now this whole rename controversy has bubbled over into critical race theory. So not only are we talking about, oh, we weren't racist back then, we're not racist now, even though we were founded by a Klan member, we celebrated a Klan member, we made sure Klan members had positions of power and privilege in the community. This is just the one that you know about. On top of that, now we're not racist, but we don't want to talk about equity in the classroom. We don't want to talk about any of this history. We don't want to talk about why the Civil War was fought, or that slavery was bad, or, manifest destiny and the genocide of Native Americans happened, or that there are other genders and other sexual orientations that exist out there that need to be considered, other religions that need to be considered, in regard to understanding the world at whole. Like, all of that is nonsense. All of that, is a distraction in taking away and imparting political values on our children, when in reality, we're teaching them about history and reality. Not teaching children about Muslims doesn't make Muslims not exist.
Right. I don't know if you know this, but how long did it take I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, because it literally just popped in my head. But how long did it take for Native American, like the Trail of Tears, the experience of how oppressive the colonizing was to Native Americans. How long did that take to get into history books?
To be honest, I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, like it was in history books in all honesty, initially, but the question was how it was covered in the history books. And so basically when you're hearing about stuff like Custer's Last Stand, you're hearing about, oh, Custer was beset by savages. And no, like these motherfuckers were fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their land, fighting for their independence. So it's not Custer's last stand. It was, the victory of those natives who were like, we're done with this and we're tired of you all genociding us to the point of extinction. You already killed off most of the buffalo in this country, so we don't have anything to eat. You put us on land that's not potable. We can't grow shit there, and we're fighting for our lives. But Custer's Last Stand. So it was in the history books, but it wasn't in a history book it wasn't in the history books in a way that portrayed indigenous people as people who were being attacked. It was basically depicting them as people who were doing the attacking. And the heroes were those people who, quote unquote, settled the wild, wild West. So it's always been in history books. It's just not, hasn't always.
Well, no, you make a very valid point. I mean, perspective, right? I mean, the book is written based off of whoever wants you to understand what perspective that they're seeing. I was just wondering, like, I guess the perspective of Native American suffering, when did that start to become inclusive in if I'm just be frank, like where white people started writing about it?
I would say probably around when we're talking about, as we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about, the 60s, 70s, where people start recognizing the history of this country, and they start fighting for their rights. And so as, Blacks are fighting for, their civil rights and the end of Jim Crow, other their intersectionality happens, and other subgroups are like, hey, we need to start talking about our history too. And so at that point, that's when you start seeing, academics and whatnot, making sure that they focus on rewriting textbooks, or covering, unknown aspects of history, or hidden aspects of history. And some of that stuff is still continuing to occur to this day, because we're talking about decades upon decades of, suppressing truth, suppressing fact. And there's still some things we still don't know. Like I said, my school district founded by a Klan member, but I don't know what were the other Klan members that were in political office, in the area. Where are their descendants? What kind of power do they hold now? We talk about white supremacy being this thing that is, amorphous and invisible and ambiguous, when there are very, very real people in office, in positions of power all across this country, who know what they're doing, and they're continuing to do it. And some may be doing it, with every confidence that they're doing the right thing because of the programming they were brought up with. Some people may be doing it knowing that they're in the wrong, but at the end of the day, the effect is the same.
I'm gonna kind of piggyback off that concept and say just myself, like, of course, I know growing up in the Northeast, I was limited in just what I was exposed to. That's definitely been a theme throughout these discussions. But I'll be honest with you, and why Native American history just came into my mind was because yesterday was Christopher Columbus Day, is the first thing that comes into my mind, but it's Indigenous Peoples Day. And for how long, I'm pretty sure that wasn't federally changed until maybe the last decade. I don't know for sure. I don't know that. But then I'm just sitting here and I'm like, yo, as much as I learned about Native American culture, I just did a basic Google search to try to answer my own question I had given you. And it dawned on me, I saw the US Indian boarding school history. I know I've been seeing a lot of the boarding school awareness. Never learned about that. Still can't even say I even know. I'm reading a blurb on Google. But it reminded me of my other topic that you were talking about with your it's not even a new topic, but we brought up confirmation bias, and in this discussion about implicit biases, is sometimes we'll do them. A confirmation bias can be an implicit bias at the same time, because we don't always know that we're confirming our own sense of knowledge. And your research, most research can be what am I trying to say? It can be confirmation bias. For your example, exactly, in a modern day research, and we have boards that's supposed to make sure research and quality surveys are supposed to be accurate and unbiased. But you take a concept, a poll about race, but you take race out of it. Like, you can essentially research anything that you want with all the limitations and get the answer that you want every single time if you put enough constraint and bias.
Mosquito. Sorry, mosquito. No, I totally no. I'm sorry, it was mosquito. But
ADD, no, it's all good. It's just
I
ADD
hate
moment.
mosquitoes. I hate mosquitoes with a passion.
Hey,
But
white and sweet
but no,
blooded.
you're right. You're right. I mean, but that's the peril of living in the age of information. It's very, very easy to find to have the answer and then find the question you're looking for that will give you that answer. And that's not by accident, that's by design. There are think tanks and there are bad actors all over the globe who have taken advantage of American ignorance, and also, I hope I'm using the term right, our narcissism in regard to how we see the world, how our worldview is, our desire to want to have that confirmation bias so we don't have to analyze those things about ourselves that make us have to step back, reevaluate, be wrong, go eat crow. One of the worst things you can do on the internet is to be wrong. One of the worst things you can do in society is to be wrong, because now that means you got to pay, and you got to pay more often than not in some form of capital compensation, something that makes you look weak. And you can't look weak if you're trying to get more followers. You can't look weak if you're trying to give investors confidence. You can't look weak if you're trying to look like a leader of this organization. And so our own vanity compels us not to want to analyze ourselves, not to want to challenge our confirmation biases in order to engender the loyalty, response, riches of those who think and feel just like we do, because it's easier for us to communicate with them than it is to step outside that bubble into the unknown, where we may not have that financial protection, we may not have those resources, we may not have those job opportunities, we may not have, the opportunity to find a suitable mate, because we were raised in this very, very conservative, bigoted way that it's really not popular with a lot of women outside of our circle. So I need to perpetuate this some way, somehow, in order for me to preserve myself. It's better for me to stay safe, stay with my people, stay bigoted, stay racist, stay and compartmentalize that way and stay home. Mic drop, yes.
I'm glad you're my friend and you know what that means.
I know.
I'm glad. I want to leave it there too, because we only have 10 minutes left. Because I think ultimately it's interesting. I'm starting to wonder, right? Like, the solution or the resolution, it really comes down to some key items. Oh, I know it. Yeah. Well, and one of them, now this is something that takes people a while to understand. Keela and I were talking about it, I think right when you came on, is the concept of vulnerability. Being able to admit you don't know everything, or that you've made mistakes, or you will make mistakes, or you are and you have weaknesses, is what gives you the power that we fear we don't have when we don't show up in a vulnerable state. And it's honestly, it's one of the hardest, no, I'm not gonna say that. It's one of the most difficult parts of my job, is trying to explain why vulnerability is actually so powerful. because for people, it only will make sense until after you do it. And I do not know, I find myself to be a very pretty creative, resourceful, empathetic person, but because I could never 100% fully understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, I could never fully 100% be able to explain why people need to take the risk, because I can't viscerally tap into them.
Mhm.
Now I've tried, I find my own ways, and I think I've accomplished it in some ways, but technically, if I'm being completely honest here, it's manipulative in
Well,
the, not in the negative sense though.
but the thing is, you are dealing in a place of, you're dealing with pre-existing manipulation. And so it's hard to, they say it's hard to reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. So some of this, if you're going to extract individuals from this cult-like programming, because that's what it is, it's a cult. When you talk about racism, it's a cult. We don't talk about it like that because we don't want to believe that we're surrounded by cult members, but we are. Whenever you're talking about pulling someone out of that cult of race-oriented thinking, it means that you're going to have to do some manipulation, some trickery, because they have been programmed since birth to believe what they believe, and they may have to be shocked, if you will, in some kind of immersion experience that makes them think differently. This is why for a racist to fall in love outside their race, that's the most dangerous thing, because once you have that connection with somebody, that's an immersion experience that cannot be penetrated. If you truly love or care for that individual, that's an immersion experience that can't be penetrated by that pre-existing programming. As a matter of fact, you want to challenge that programming so you can get closer to that individual. And that's why love is a very, very powerful thing, whether it is intimate emotionally between two people who are married or just two really, really close friends. Love compels you to want to seek things out. And I gotta get ready to go because I gotta call my son. He's getting deployed tomorrow.
Oh, he is? Where?
Yeah. To Japan.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
All
Love
right,
you. Bye.
love you too. Bye.